Thank you, Chairman H.D. Chambers. As you mentioned, representing the Texas School Alliance, and for those that are not familiar, that's an organization of the 45 or so largest school districts in Texas, urban, suburban, and to be quite honest with you, any form of educational savings account or voucher is going to particularly impact our school districts, probably more so than any other school systems in the state of Texas. So this is of severe interest to us. We are in opposition to it, but we also understand the policy discussion and the political discussion that's going on around this topic. I want to spend my time commenting a couple things on assessment. It's kind of interesting. I thought I was coming to a ESA hearing and it turned into a testing hearing earlier this morning. But I want to make a comment on this specifically. Yes, it is rushed. I feel like this conversation, it is so complex and it is so complicated. And there have been commissions in the past and there have been discussions in the past. But I would encourage this committee and the body, as you look at testing and how it impacts accountability, to spend some time perhaps in an interim study and really shed daylight on what is going on. I want to comment President Harrison, you brought up earlier about the diplomas versus CCMR numbers. And I'd like to just to put that in perspective, much of what we define CCMR ready these days has been based on test scores, some form of test. And we have a segment of our student population that struggles in those areas, whether it's ACT, SAT, et cetera. Our state, over the last decade, I guess, has begun putting more emphasis on workforce. It's been putting more emphasis on identifying what are true credentials and certifications within the workforce industry that are actually going to lead to high-paying jobs. And so, while the percentages are what they are, the details, I would encourage us to have a little bit deeper discussion on how those numbers are arrived at and what is actually occurring as it relates to the students who are getting the diploma, as you mentioned, versus the students who are leaving that stage prepared for some form of college, some form of career, or some form of the armed services. Because there are multiple ways to meet that definition in the real world outside of high school, more so than what there are just simply defined in our code right now or our accountability manual. So I didn't want that to. It was a very good point. It was a valid question. It was an extremely fair question. And school systems have been challenged with how do we prepare our most challenging students, our poor students, our non-English speaking students, our students who are coming from a lack of experiences in their home life and the inability for them to have access to some of the things other students have. And so those in the Alliance, we are fighting that every single day. So as it relates to testing and accountability, I would strongly encourage a little bit more time be spent, but fully recognize this. And the last thing I'll say on this, for those who believe and have been saying publicly that, you know what, I could probably stomach some form of ESA, or I maybe even be able to support it if we're doing away with quote unquote STAR. You're not doing away with STAR. You may be changing the name of it. You're not. There is nothing that is going to do away with the exam and the way in which it's used. Now, I will reserve my opinion because Chairman Buckey, you made in my opinion, the statement of the morning. The devil's in the details. Your body, this committee in the past, have passed legislation over the last decade as it relates to assessment and accountability that we felt was reasonable. But as it made its way through rulemaking and as it made its way through other people having their fingerprints on it, it didn't turn out the way what we felt it should, and the way in which, in some cases, the committee that was in place and the body felt. So the devil's in the details it's never been truer than it is in this conversation. ESAs. I think we need to learn from what's happened in other states. You probably have all done your own research. But as it sits right now, one of the things that we have been told by others who have researched this across our country is that there is a huge difference between the access that students might have or families might have versus who's eligible. It seems like every time I hear a quote, and one came out last night in a statement, that there's a number on it. And it seems like all some are worried about is the eligibility component of that. And so I would tell you that right now there is there's lessons to be learned from other states that have gone down this road. And I'll wrap my comments up by talking about and this really has to do with this bill and then what might lead from this bill. We're concerned about where this is going to take the state of Texas financially and as it relates to serving our students. And I would ask you to think about where and what the role of public education is and how it has come over the last 200 years to where it is right now. You may not agree with what I'm getting ready to say, but a lot of people, not only in education, believe this, but it seems as a casual observer, you watch what's going on as it relates to choice, as it relates to potentially taxpayer funds being used in the private sector. But our entire country is built, I hear the beeper, I'll shut up, I hear it. Our entire country is built and has sustained since its beginning on communities, on towns, cities, counties, states. And it's arguable that the core of every community, whether you're a large urban, suburban district, or whether you're a small rural or a mid-size, the core of that has been the school system. And I know we're only talking about a handful of students. And I know we're only some people will say, well, HD, we're only talking about a small segment of students. But it's, to me, and to others, it appears that there's a pulling of the fabric of those communities. It's happening a fabric at a time, a piece at a time. And I'm just worried about what this looks like, not next year, not in 24, 25, not even in 27, 28. I'm really concerned that in the next 20, 30, 40 years, does the same strength that gave our country its ability to sustain to this point, which I believe is local communities, towns, et cetera, taking care of themselves. I'm just concerned about that. And that's more of a philosophical, perhaps, and I don't mean to be preaching, but that's at the core of some of our concerns who are really worried about if we just let people self-segregate themselves based on education, what does that do to local towns? What does that do to local communities? And so that's something I hope that as you take votes, not only in this meeting, in this committee on this bill, but as you move forward, that you think through what that could potentially do to our local the whole concept of communities. So with that, thank you. Appreciate your patience.